this, and I appreciate all three of you coming out tonight. Like I said, this event was birthed out of trying to talk about legacy. And what does legacy look like for us? And people think of assets and bank accounts and retirement when they think of legacy. But there's so much more that goes behind it. The values that we want to pass on as parents and as loved ones, and what that looks like. So my first question is going to be for Brendan. So you've said most estate plans don't fail because of money, that they fail because of silence. Why do families think not talking is a strategy? Is it kind of the financial version of hiding under the covers from the boogeyman?
How's this? Better? Okay, all right then. Do I look cool if you're holding this in front of me? It's just like good. So a couple things real quick too. That Zach mentioned that as opposed to having me stand up here and talk the whole time, which I did about this time last year for some of you guys that were here, I took that as a hint that you did not want me to stand up and talk again the whole time, so that's okay. I'm going to get over that. And you mentioned that money is emotional and human beings are emotional. There's another dynamic that comes in when we think about legacy and estate planning. That family dynamics are also pretty emotional, right? So now we're layering in a third element of money's emotional, people are emotional, and then you layer in a family dynamic, and it creates a whole new emotional layer to deal with. So when we think about estate planning, we think about legacy planning, the money, or it's the assets, the money, and also the stories and values that we want to leave behind to our loved ones. We tend to think, and this isn't a bad thing, by the way, because if you go Google, how do I prepare my estate for my loved ones, you're going to get a lot of good, sound, technical, legal advice, which is great, by the way. But what the research shows is that you can have all of that done, you can have all of that in order, you can check all of your technical, legal boxes, and estate plans can still go terribly wrong. Why does that happen? Well, what we know from the research is that there's two main reasons why estate plans go wrong. Number one, it's the communication breakdown. Not because the documents aren't in order, but because there's not enough dialogue happening amongst the families. So these estate plans, your legacy plans, they're just as much about dialogue as they are documents. That's number one. Number two is a trust and communication breakdown. Number two is so you can look at these things and you go, okay, hang on. There's these things going on. Nobody tells me when I go get these documents done that I need to also think about how I'm going to communicate these things to my family. Yet we know that those are the things that actually make these plans start falling apart, go awry. And so the way that I heard it phrased, I think that if I'm going to say it one way that you guys can leave here tonight, hopefully remember it, would be this. It's that we do so much work preparing our assets for our family. We need to think more about how do we prepare the family to receive the assets. And so I think I said trust and communication breakdown for both number one and number two. Trust and communication breakdown is number one. Preparing whoever the heirs are is number two. So we need to do a better job preparing the heirs to receive the assets. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like, how that happens, how to do it, but it's just a completely different way to look at the estate planning and legacy process. One more thing, Zach just mentioned this, but I'll just reiterate it or I'll add on to it. That is your legacy. When we think legacy, we think estate plan, we tend to think documents a lot. We think dollar signs, we think accounts, we think assets, and those are all critical components. But it's also the values that you want to pass down. It's also the stories that you want your family to remember. It's the things that you want to instill in future generations.
On time.
Good.
Test.
There it is.
Oh, wait.
Thanks, Greg.
Yep.
So next one for Andrew here. So is there ever a good reason to play hide the ball with your assets that you own, or is it just a guaranteed way to really turn your kids into detectives?
Yeah, it's a good question, Zach, and I really appreciated it's about dialogue and not just documents. So I want to touch on that again. I think that's a great thought, Brendan. I had a mentor. I definitely think there's a timing element that matters to when we bring younger generations into the loop, for example, about assets. I had a business mentor that he and his wife worked very hard while their kids were in junior high and high school to keep them believing that the family was just middle class, even though he had a company that was doing very, very well and was growing very fast, and they wanted the kids to be able to develop normally and to grow character and work ethic and all these things. And so they were very hush-hush about where the family was at financially and the existence of assets and values and all of that. So yeah, I think at times that makes sense, but I think too many families kind of take that hush-hush all the way through life, all the way to the grave. And I can't tell you the number of probate estates that I open on a regular basis where people just tell me, I don't know what my dad had, I don't know what my mom, we never talked about that. And so, yeah, there's times where certainly we want to look at where people are at in their stages of life and when it's appropriate, but we don't get enough communication going on, especially as people start to age, about just the existence of assets. Even if we don't get into values and we don't get into what's going to get sold or who's going to get what, having a general asset list that a family can use that breaks down where things are, key third parties that need to be contacted, beneficiary structures on things. I mean, these are just good, practical steps that a family can take that then they can dialogue with their children about and say, hey, we have this list, and this is, these are people you're going to need to contact when the time comes. These are where assets are right now, or how things are titled. So, yeah, I think there's, can be value at times to playing hide the ball for a short period of time. But when we play hide the ball for an entire lifetime, that backfires and things get missed. And so, yeah.
Wait, can I ask a question?
I've got a question, sorry. I'm wondering, you say that people come and they say, yeah, I have no idea what my dad had, or my mom had, or my parents had. Does anybody ever say, I have no idea what my parents had, and I'm so glad that they never told me?
No.
Okay. I mean, I actually mean that seriously. Like, is there a case to be made for, I never knew, and I'm glad that I never knew?
Maybe in the rare instance where everything was passed into someone else in the family and it was going to come together. So, just some instance where it would be better off not knowing what mom and dad had because it's like the plan of disposition.
Yeah.
But other than that, I can't think of a time everybody happy.
You never heard it?
No. Yeah.
Actually, it's you next, friend. So we're hearing silence, secrecy, obviously not good things when it comes to it. Denial, probably another, not another thing that we want to throw into that mix. So my next question for Brendan, do families avoid these talks because they're afraid of conflicts? Or is it because they think crazy Aunt Sally's going to start judging them on where they're actually at in their life and what their decisions that they're making are?
Yeah, I know this one is pretty much what you'd expect, so it's twofold. On one hand, you've got the fact that money is not a fun topic, it's a taboo topic. Most people say that they would rather talk about politics and sex with their family members than they would money. And it seems weird to think about like that, it seems weird to say it like that, but it's true, it's not a topic that throughout our lives we're taught to talk about openly with hardly anybody. Right? I mean, even in marriages, oftentimes people struggle to talk about money together. So on one hand, you look at it and you go, it's a little bit awkward. It's not fun to talk about. It's not something that you look forward to talking about. So that's money. The second part of it is that death isn't something that anybody wants to talk about. Nobody wants to think about the day that they're gone. Hey, if I'm no longer here, here's what's going to happen. And so you've got two forces at play. Number one, nobody wants to talk about money. Number two, nobody wants to talk about death. Both of those things are important or critical elements of this conversation. So by nature, we avoid it. By the way, it's also one of those things that's easy to put off because it's not like you're doing something to address an immediate pain. You're trying to take care of a future issue, right? It's the same reason why we are, as a society, we have no problem taking painkillers, but we have a hard time taking vitamins on a regular basis because we'll do anything to alleviate immediate pain, but we don't want to do the things that help us in the future. So this is something where if you don't do anything about it today, you're not going to feel any pain, so it's easy to push it off into the future and go, I'm going to deal with it one day. I'm going to deal with it later on when I get around to it. And so I think that's the main component of it, is these are awkward topics that nobody really wants to talk about. And here's the other factor. And so I was in Tennessee the other day, and I said it this way. We were having a similar conversation. It was one where I was presenting. They had to listen to me talk the whole time. This is one of those boring ones. And I told him, I was like, you know, guys, sometimes I come to these, and so I get to go around the country and do this. And so it's like, I go to these things, and I'm like, am I going to be the guy that says this? Like, nobody wants to hear this, but am I going to say it? I think I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't say it this way. I think another reason why it doesn't come up is because there's a lot of families who think, they go, well, I know that's important, but those issues, the tension that arises from not talking about it, it's not going to happen to our family. No, I know those families. There we go. Those families, right? Yeah, like they probably don't get along. They've already got issues, but not our family. Like our family, we'll get it taken care of, no problem. And I can assure you that the families that have the most tension are the ones that think that way because they don't address it. The families who think that there might be tension address it, and they're the ones that they don't, maybe they don't avoid it, but they at least talk about it. So that's not a fun thing to say. It doesn't earn me any likes or doesn't get you guys to think, like, oh, I like what Brendan's saying. It's a tough message to receive, but we know it to be true that the families who think, oh, not my family, that's another reason why they tend to avoid it.
And I think Craig and I, just to echo that, over the last decade and a half of working together, can say we've seen a lot of clients who, my kid will do everything right. You know, my kid's gonna make good decisions when they get their money, or when I'm in a tough predicament, my kid's gonna, you know, take care of me. And money changes people, unfortunately. And again, it doesn't make us the happy people to sit here and say that message, and like he said, it doesn't get us the likes, but it's true, unfortunately. Money changes a lot of people, and so you wanna have those conversations. So that's good, I appreciate that. So Andrew, why is adding, so we're talking about, you know, what it looks like, beyond that, beyond the emotional side, but why is adding one of the kids' names to an account kind of like the estate planning equivalent of giving a kid a match and putting them in a fireworks store?
Well, I have somebody every single week, Zach, that tells me they have a kid on a bank account, or a kid on a money market, or a kid on a brokerage account. It's always the chosen child, as I call it. It's the one they have confidence in, that they believe will not do any wrong. Usually the first thing I ask them when they say, oh, I've already added Susie, I've already added Billy to the account, is what does that mean when you say that? Because that could mean different things. Does that mean that you gave them check signing authority at the bank? Does that mean that you added them as a co-owner on the account, and that their name is actually showing up as an owner? Or did you name them as a pay-on-death beneficiary? So we talk through first if they even understand what they did. And then two, we talk about other things that they might not even be thinking about, like the liability side of adding people to accounts before you're dead. So, you know, you go take a kid, you have grandma has a money market account that's got $90,000 in it or whatever it is, and she adds one of her children to it, and they're out driving around in a car and hit somebody. And then all of a sudden something happens and somebody say, well, that's your money. Well, no, that's my grandma's money, or that's my mom's money. And so sometimes there's unintended consequences that come from doing those things, but there's also a right way to do it. You know, we have a financial power of attorney, and we give somebody a lifetime permission slip, basically, to step in and help us if we need it. And we don't make them an owner, and then we name the ones we want as beneficiaries if we're doing a beneficiary-based plan. And that keeps us from going into that period where somebody's going to start to reason out the conclusion that they want to reach on why their parent named them on that account and why they should get to keep the money. And I've watched multiple kids talk themselves into doing something other than what I thought their parents actually wanted when they were on an account. Usually it's some sort of thought process like, well, I did so much for mom at the end of her life. I was the one who was taking her to all the doctor's appointments. I was the one who was getting her. They start telling themselves a story as to why they shouldn't split this money market account that's got 60 grand in it with their two siblings, and they end up blowing sibling relationships over 20 or 40 grand, and it's just sad to see. And it's usually they're telling themselves some story, but I don't actually blame them. I blame the parent because they put them on there. And so, yeah, those are some thoughts on that, I think.
At this point in time, I was gonna kind of look back. My twin sister was supposed to be here, and I was gonna talk about me being the golden child or not. She forgot about tonight, and so I'm just gonna let that stand there. So I should probably ask Greg a question because he's gonna tell me later that he was sad because he didn't get to answer enough questions. So Craig, when you're sitting with families, what's the biggest red flag that tells you, yep, there's probably gonna be a monopoly board that's gonna be flipped over because of this?
Yeah, it's actually a great question, and Andrew kind of addressed it already. So I like to break it up in two ways. So like from the administration side, then also the inheritance side. And it kind of goes back to, as parents, you're not supposed to play favorites, but I can say I'm also the golden child, the favorite child of my sister and I. But it's mostly when, if there is a favorite child or say a successful child like a doctor or something like that, sometimes parents say, well, I want to designate 75% of my account to Sally and then 25% to Justin, because Justin's a doctor, Sally needs it more than Justin. But the issue with that is if you pass away, you don't communicate that, why, the thoughts behind it, there's going to be resentment among siblings, kind of like what you said, and you see how the money kind of starts to break down that relationship. But then there's also sometimes if there's like minor kids or even a more responsible kid, like parents say, okay, I'm going to designate 100% to the most responsible kid, and they'll know what to do with the funds. And it's like, well, you're hoping that they know what to do with the funds, that they're going to distribute it, but then you run into a couple issues with, if they inherit a retirement account, for example, with the new rules anyway, you have to have that retirement account depleted by 10 years. But whoever's that beneficiary, that shows up on their income taxes, right? So if someone, say, for example, inherits $1 million, $100,000 each year they have to take out, well, it shows up on that person's individual income tax, but then you're kind of hoping, they're going to take that $100,000 and then distribute it amongst their siblings, instead of maybe being like the kids 25% each, and then each kid's responsible for the beneficiary, their own respective shares, so it shows up on their own tax return. So that's kind of the first one, the first two I see. But then from the administration side, I see, and it's usually not the stereotype, but it's usually a guy that says it's well, I don't have to worry about that, I'm dead. They'll figure it out. And it's like, well, during death, it's an emotional thing, and wouldn't you rather try to set up your family to have one less thing that they have to worry about? They can focus on grieving and going through that process instead of having to figure out what the heck am I doing with all these accounts here. But then it's also we always hear, well, my husband handles that, or my wife handles that, they handle the finances. It's like, well, you need to be involved in this process. And we had a client, it was I think 7 years ago, whatever, we did a financial plan for him, and the guy ended up passing away, and the wife had no idea. She's like, he handles all that. And then watching her go through that, that's emotional for me, because we even said, what happens if something happens to your husband? And then the husband was like, oh, well, I'm gonna tell her to talk to you guys. So there's just a couple things from the red flag standpoint that I can see, but that could be easily avoided with just having a conversation or being involved in the conversation and just being involved with it.
I bet.
So I'm hearing it's good to have conversations. I'm hearing that over and over here. Now, this next question's for both Andrew and Brendan. How do you balance wanting things to be fair with the fact that being fair normally means everyone's kind of pissed off at the end of the day?
I think I talk to clients a lot about how equal and equitable aren't necessarily the same thing, and just, looking at the needs of the family, looking at, I deal pretty regularly with mothers who are convinced that every child needs to be named in every document, no matter what. I just want to make sure, even if they're the fourth backup or something, I want to see all their names in there. And I get it. There's this desire for equal. Just put them all in there equal and make sure their names show up everywhere. But I think it's important to look at, the differences in, one, their financial maturity, two, what are the setbacks that they faced in life and things like that. And so sometimes, I've seen some people do some amazing things with money where they're blessing some kids in their family who have been in hard accidents and things, and they're not doing anything close to an equal distribution really on paper, but it's very equitable when you see the love, and even the ones that talk to the other children about, hey, you know what, you've been able to get this master's degree, you've been able to do this, you've been able to do this, but your sister was in an accident, and we're going to let some money flow to her because she needs it more. And so I talk about the equal and equitable difference and try to get them to think through where their family's really at.
Yeah, I think the theme that keeps coming up, that Craig just mentioned twice, that you just hit on a second ago, is this idea. It's communication. And I know that sounds simple, but going back to the beginning when I said the majority of the plans that go wrong, the number one reason is a lack of trust and communication. These are specific examples as to why that's the case. You've got the family that Craig mentioned who one kid gets a little bit more than the other because this kid's better off, or this kid doesn't need it as much as this kid does, but you don't communicate that. And so when the time comes and you're gone, the assets are being dispersed, they see two different amounts, but they don't know the reasoning behind it. That's just a communication breakdown. Right? That's when we say lack of communication and preparedness, that's a tangible example of what that looks like. So how do you make things fair if they seem unfair? I think I would just go back to, so my wife's a therapist. And so she always likes to say the path through conflict is communication. It can be uncomfortable and it may not be fun, but anytime you've got a situation that could potentially create conflict, the path to get through it is communication. Now, I'm admittedly the worst at it. I would rather just bury it in the sand and move on, be like, oh, we're all gonna be okay. But if you're trying to think, how do I best communicate? How do I make things equal, not equitable? Equitable, no, what is it? Say it again.
Well, just equal and equitable.
Equal and equitable.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm saying equitable.
And equal are not the same thing. And so if you approach planning from the standpoint of everything has to be equal, and I think that's the wrong mentality. I think you should approach it from what are the needs, who's ready to handle certain assets, who's got skin in the game, maybe on businesses and invested a lot into helping grow these things, or whatever it may be, who's been in a tough accident and really hasn't had a fair shake at getting on their feet the way that these ones, things fell together for them. And so I try to not tell people where to leave their stuff. That's not my job. But my job is to get them to think about what's equitable amongst your family situation. And if that doesn't add up to 33 and a third, 33 and a third, 33 and a third, that's okay. You're not doing something wrong. You might be doing something very right.
And if you're gonna do that, you need to communicate and explain why you're doing what you're doing, right? If you're not gonna leave an equal amount, just say, hey, here's my thought process behind. So the path through potential conflict is communication.
I like it how Brendan said that he likes to stuff everything down when his entire career is built on helping people ask the right questions. So I can just imagine sitting with him and his wife on a double date and just hearing her therapist, him asking the right questions, and just them kind of going back and forth and being an interesting double date there. But so we're talking about money, and if we think of how bad it can be to talk about money with kids, now let's start thinking about how much more difficult is it to talk about dad's gun collection and mom's crock pot that she's had for 35 years that, a million things have been made. So, bringing that up, what hurts families more, or actually before that, Andrew, this one's for you. Why does divide equally with jewelry and heirlooms turned into World War II? What are your thoughts there?
I think it's one of the most overlooked, tangible personal property, right? One of the most overlooked areas of estate planning because parents kick the can in this area more than any other area that I see. They're very much concerned about who the beneficiaries are on the big IRA or who's going to get the house. But frankly, it's not hard to divide an IRA. It's not hard to chop up a checking account. But tangible personal property, people just continue to amaze me at how hard they will fight over it as the years go by and I continue to practice. And it's usually two categories of stuff, right? It's shiny stuff that people have been fighting over for thousands of years. And it's gold and diamonds and bling bling. And it's sentimental. And they fight twice as hard over the sentimental stuff as they do the shiny stuff. And so I think what we need to get in the practice of is starting to look in our own family structures, in our own households, and saying, what do we have that falls into one of these categories? It's either sentimentally valuable, or fiscally valuable. And how are we not going to kick the can on this stuff? And I think that boils down to, one, we got to put our thoughts down in writing. We have to be willing to write things down and sign our name to them and say, I want my daughter, who's the oldest, to get my wedding ring. That's not wrong. It's your wedding ring. You decide who gets it. Put it down in writing. We need to maybe have conversations. I think there's two main ways I see families do it. One is the ones that do a good job. I would say one is they write it down and they say, look, it's very clear what our intentions are with, maybe it's guns or maybe it's jewelry or whatever it is, but we're not going to detail all of this to our kids now, and that's okay. But it's very clear, and then the other is they start family conversations. You know, I've had families that have their kids home for Thanksgiving or whatever, and they say, hey, like, we're all gonna be gone someday. What do we have in this house that you all love and want? And let's just talk about it. Let's have a couple glasses of wine and tell us what you want when we're dead, right? And they just break it out, and then they have a conversation, and they start to figure out that there's actually a little bit of a riff over the, you know, the one cuckoo clock that everybody wants or whatever. And they start to sniff out where are the problems gonna be. So yeah, I just think people kick the can on it, and there's too much of a mentality of, I don't need to write it down, I don't need to take this seriously, I put somebody on the IRA, I put somebody on the house, that's good enough. But people will fight over a box of photos, and I've watched them do it.
I don't suggest this, but my brother and I recently had a conversation, and between the two of us, we said, hey, just start taking stuff that you want to make sure it doesn't go to someone else. So every time I'm over at my dad's house, I sneak something into the car. I tell my kids, hey, if there's something in the one of the toys or something that's left over there, just take it, name it, pop remember it, there it is.
See, that was good communication between you and your brother.
That's right.
You came to an agreement, you communicated.
Right.
We met, yeah.
We didn't say communication amongst everyone, we just made it between us.
Endorsed it. You don't endorse it, that's fine. It's
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
So Brendan, what hurts more to families, fighting over the money or realizing too late that no one bothered to have the conversations?
I think we all know the answer to that question. Right? You kind of team me up, huh? So, yeah, that's good. I like that. That would be a good softball question. Yeah, I mean, it's no, without a doubt, it's not having the conversation. So I have this example that I think about a lot with it's the Humphreys family that I used to work with. They had this lake house that they would go to. Summer lake house, well, not just, they would go all the time, but they mainly went in the summers. It wasn't their main place, but they'd go. And so there were two kids, Grant and Madeline. They went every summer growing up. They'd spend their summers on the lake with their parents. Well, fast forward all these years later, their parents are 75 and 72. They both pass away. Grant and Madeline are like 42 and 38. I think they've got kids now. And they were the family, the Humphreys family. They were the family that said, hey, you know what? Like, we know we probably need to talk about it, but it's never going to happen to our family. Despite all the urging that we went through of, hey, you guys should really talk about what you're going to do with not just the lake house, but everything, right? And they had documents in place. So they had a plan in place for what was going to happen to that lake house. Well, fast forward through the whole process and everything, and what they come to find out is that the lake house is being kept. And so Madeline, the daughter, she was pumped about it. She was like, this is great, this is where our family grew up, we have all these memories from going to this lake house. Our kids and the grandkids have been going to this lake house. Of course we're gonna keep the lake house. But Grant, our older brother, was like, absolutely not, we're not keeping this lake house. Neither one of us live close to it. Have you looked, by the way, at the maintenance cost to keep this thing up and running? Somebody's gotta be there, somebody's gotta pay for it, we gotta go invest our time, we don't live there. And so for 2 years, they just went back and forth battling over what to do with this lake house. The documents told them what to do. They said you need to keep it, but they were at odds in that instance. And so Grant didn't go back to that lake house for those 2 years because of the tension that it was causing. He saw it as a symbol of tension in his family dynamic. And I look at that example and I go, well, what's better? Is it better to talk about it or to not talk about it? And you sit there and you go, what caused 2 years worth of family tension could have potentially been avoided by one conversation. Just saying, hey, what do you guys think we should do with lake house? Go to the lake house. I don't know why he keeps doing that. Anyways, go to the lake house for Thanksgiving and sit at the lake house as a family and say, guys, one day we're going to be gone. What do you want to do with this lake? If it's going to be yours, how do you want to handle the lake house? And let them both express their view, what they want to do, why they want to do it. And yeah, it may not be a seamless, smooth 2-minute conversation that results in complete uniformity and decision making where they're like, yeah, we're all on the same page, but you're at least opening the conversation when they're not emotional and raw from their parents being gone. and now they can't come to a decision. By the way, they're the two siblings left. All they have is each other, and they spent 2 years not talking to each other. So it's always better to address it beforehand. There may be tension, there might be, but it's always going to be better than what comes by putting it off.
Great.
My wife and I are probably more of the generation of being a little bit more sensitive when, educating our kids. We have 5 kids, by the way, and so it's a busy household. And this reminds me, I remember one of my kids in my parents' basement hasn't been redone in years, and there was a hole in the bathroom wall. And they were like, "Hey, Dad, what was that hole in the bathroom wall from in the basement?" And I was like, "Oh, that's where Uncle Lucas ran Uncle Aaron's head through the wall," because they were in a fight. And they're like, "Do they talk anymore?" I was like, "Yeah, they hung out that night. Like, that's just what we did. We'd rather have an uncomfortable, quick conversation, or for us it was fighting as guys sometimes do when we were younger, and then we were good to go. Versus other families kind of stuff everything down, and then it all just comes bubbling up one day, in the future, whether it's over religion, politics, sex, whatever it is. And so we'd rather have that conversation and kind of duke it out, quickly, and have it be a little crazy sometimes. So kind of goes with that same story.
Absolutely.
Could save 2 years. So we talked about the kind of the emotion. We talked about dividing the money. We talked about assets and kind of what that conversation looks like and having those conversations. So now we need to talk about the awkward part of like, who do we put in charge if we're to pass away or if something were to happen? And that's kind of like saying, who gets to be the villain of the story? Because everyone has an idea of why they should be put in charge as one of the kids. So this question first for Andrew. When it comes to putting someone in charge, should you pick the kid with the financial skills, the one who has some medical background, or I was going to nod at my sister again, the loudest sibling that's there? Who do you pick and how do you go through that?
Yeah, it's always a tough decision to figure out who's going to steward things or help manage things and distribute things when we're gone. I do think that you touched on it a little bit. Part of the questions, I just try to ask good questions and help people work their way to good answers and think through them. So I always tell clients, you're not here to make people happy. You're here to make the right decisions. So tell me about your kids. What are their skill sets? What are their backgrounds? What are their educations and training? And usually throughout the course of the planning conversation, I'm just learning about them anyways, and I'm learning who they really have high regard for, which one they think married the wrong person and all this. And so it's like you're getting a little bit of everything along the way, but try to look for skill sets. And then also, what roles are we trying to fill? So obviously if it's a healthcare power of attorney or something, it's going to be a different skill set that I'm looking for. I'm looking for proximity. I'm looking for somebody that can actually show up, keep a level head, be emotionally calm amidst chaotic circumstances, talk to doctors and nurses and make sure I'm receiving a reasonable standard of care and communicate things well with the family about what's going on. That's a different skill set than who's going to pay my bills, or who's going to make sure tax filings happen timely, or license plates don't expire on vehicles and things like that. Who's more organized and tactical and financially savvy. And so, I think you got to look at skill sets. Sometimes I think it's okay to pair a couple together, make them co-agents on something, make them co-trustees. I think there's, strength in numbers sometimes, and just accountability is good. And sometimes you got to go away from your kids. Sometimes you got to look at your children and say, these are not the right people to be in charge. And I have to go outside the family line. I got to look at a corporate trustee maybe. I got to look at Huntington Private Bank, or I got to look at, a company or a third party that's a close lifelong friend or something. So it's okay to sometimes step away from the family line if there's just not great options there.
That's a question.
You can.
I'm curious, do you ever have a situation where you see in the family dynamic, sorry, I can't help myself, if I'm going out of line, okay. Or you got the family dynamic, you find the person, you pinpoint the person, you're like, hey, they've got the chops, they've got the skills to fulfill blank role, whatever it is. And so you kind of say that they're going to do that. Do you ever have somebody that says, I don't want to do it? Or do you check beforehand and say, like, hey, we think you'd be great at it, do you want it? And then they say no. Like, how do you handle that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my joke with that is we outlawed slavery a long time ago, so we can't, force people to do these things, right? And we got to compensate them reasonably. A lot of times they're serving as executor or trustee or something. They're entitled to compensation, and so we talk about that stuff and touch on it. But if somebody wants to step down, that's why we're usually looking at bench strength and trying to have an order of succession. So don't really just want your spouse, and that's it, named on a document. I want your spouse, and then the child that you have the most confidence in, and then maybe somebody else, some third party or something. So we want a little bit of depth there, because it may not even be that they want to step down, right? It just may be that they're doing their best to serve, and all of a sudden they get a gnarly diagnosis or something happens weird that we're not expecting, and they say, hey, I got to step away from this, and I can't do it. So I think it's trying to have some depth, at least a couple people deep, 2 or 3. Is wise, and then if they want to step down, then we have another option.
Do you always recommend talking to them about it? I think of the guardians for our kids, and I'd like to think that my family would all fight over who wants my kids, but we chose someone. Yeah, that's right. Maybe they would have fought over it when it was 2, but now 5. We see how much it costs, and but. We didn't tell the people who we are going to have we told the people we were going to have as guardians. We didn't tell anyone else. So do you always recommend telling whoever's going to be in charge, and maybe not telling other people, because I don't want them arguing over it, and I just,
No, I think amongst estate planning, especially for younger couples, guardianship is a unique part of the plan. And so it just is the people that you're going to give domiciliary rights to your children to raise them and pick what schools they go to and whether they stay in this league or that or whatever. That's very intimate, and so I think that conversations need to happen there related to guardianship. But in many of the other roles, I think generally educating the family as to the fact that there exists documents and that roles have been assigned to some people is okay, depending on age and where mom and dad are at. Sometimes when I'm planning with people for the first time in their 40s or 50s, I don't feel like they need to get everyone's permission that they've named on a healthcare power of attorney or a financial power of attorney. I think it's okay to have some people that you have confidence in. And also, it's nice to be able to remove somebody once in a while without them even knowing that they were in there, so you don't know when people are going to go off the rails. And if you've already, that's why I'm not a huge fan of giving everybody copies of documents and things, and sometimes it's better to just know a plan exists and there's a few people that know where to find it and how to get into the safe. But I don't think you always have to do that. I think guardianship's a bit unique.
Do you think it's more successful to have that third party, like be the executor and everything, or like in-house family do it? In my experience?
Yeah, I've gotten in many good arguments over lunch with a friend of mine who's a trustee in a private bank downtown, and she would be very strongly saying that it goes more poorly if you pick family to serve as trustee or executor. But I always say, well, that's a conflict of interest, Stephanie, because you're serving in this role, and so you just want everybody to use the bank as a trustee, right? Don't you? And so I think there's times where corporate trustees make a lot of sense. People that just financial maturity is not there. We have addiction problems that other family members sometimes say, I don't want to touch that. Don't put me in charge over the pot for that person. I don't want to deal with what comes with it. Sometimes there's just fact patterns that really lend themselves to a corporate trustee. There's also trustee advisory and support services out there. So there's firms that, maybe we like Uncle Larry, for example. We think he's a great guy. He's got great character. He's 55 years old. He always does the right thing when nobody's looking, but he's not the best bookkeeper. And we don't, there's some things where we're like, he would really, from a heart standpoint, honor our intentions and carry things out, but he needs some assistance. So we can sometimes get a third party that's just going to be a trust protector, a trust advisor that's going to kind of fly along in the wings with Uncle Larry and make sure that he's keeping everything straight. So we just look at the different options, being family, maybe a hybrid structure, or fully corporate trustee. We look at the dynamics of the family and try to guide people to the right choices. And it's unique depending on the situation.
Spoiler alert as well, when you're thinking about who takes 5 kids, in my example, when your twin sister complains all the time that she's so busy with her 1 kid, probably not the person that you want taking your 5 kids as well.
So busy that she couldn't even make it.
Correct, she was so busy she couldn't even make it tonight. So, Brendan, what are some proven ways you've seen that make a family meeting less like Thanksgiving and more like a productive meeting where things actually get done?
Yeah. Okay, so what is a family meeting? A family meeting can be a lot of things. It can be a like we mentioned a second ago. You get together at the lake house at Thanksgiving to start having and initiating these conversations. It can. I know families that have done it in a formal way where they have an agenda and they go through and they knock out the items one by one, and it gives them organization, it gives them structure, it gives them a framework to work from, and that's great. If your family, if you think your family will thrive in that, you should totally do that. There's no one right or wrong way to do it. But that's one option. The one thing I do think is important is no matter when you plan to bring it up, you don't want to just drop it in the middle of the dinner conversation while you're probably not over. It's either the Thanksgiving idea, maybe everybody's together, so that works, but holidays probably aren't the best time. But whenever you're going to set up this conversation, you don't want to just drop it in like, hey, come over for dinner, everybody. We're making this food. Come on over, everybody sit down. Oh, by the way, we want to talk about when we die. There needs to be a little bit of preparation. Like, hey guys, we want you to come over. We're going to make dinner. We're going to take care of everything. We want to talk about we want to initiate some conversation around what happens when we're gone and make sure we're all on the same page. And it doesn't have to be anything awkward or formal, but like I said, it can be. You can have an agenda and a framework that you follow. But one of my favorite examples of seeing this play out, there was a family who they decided they wanted to start initiating these conversations, but it felt really awkward. They didn't know how to do it. And so they figured, hey, like we said earlier, we're not just passing down our assets and our tangible things, we're also passing down like values, what we learn, what we know about money to the next generation. And so they started scheduling family outings to go give back to the community together. They would go do these charity things together, events together, and they would use that as an opportunity to talk about, hey, we do this because it's important to us as a family to give back to the community. I had another family that the grandparents took their entire extended family on this vacation to Europe, and they said, guys, we've been fortunate enough to be blessed with this money in our lives, and one of the things we think is important is to use money in a way to create memories and experiences as a family. And so it just started opening up these conversations around money in a more approachable way, but not just around the amounts that they had and the documents that were in place, but also around how do you use the money when you get it. So it can go from structured framework agenda meetings all the way to let's just embed it into the things that we're already doing to teach the lessons that way.
Do you ever find it beneficial, or did you ever experience where having like a third party come in to like help facilitate that conversation?
Yeah, I would never do it without a third party.
Okay.
I would never recommend doing it without a third party. It's like when my wife and I talk about our marriage in our bed at night, like it never goes as well as when we go sit down and talk with a therapist. Like something about having a third party help facilitate and navigate these conversations, it takes the conversations to another level because it helps to diffuse. Having a third party helps diffuse tension that would naturally be there. They can guide the conversation. They're a natural buffer between two parties. Somebody that's really good at it will help diffuse tension in a really healthy way. But I can't imagine saying, hey, I want to have these conversations and make it as productive and helpful as possible, and then try to do it without a third party.
Thanks. So we've talked a lot about theory. Let's talk about what we can put into practice and what that looks like. So let's get Craig involved here because he's been out of the loop for a little while. So next two questions actually for Craig. So a lot of this has been about, first off, parents preparing for their kids. Now, what about making sure your adult kids are on track? Like savings, debts, values like Brendan was saying. How do you start that conversation with them without sounding like a hovering parent that's, prying too much into their life?
I think it's a really good point because I can't really think of an instance when I was growing up, but maybe mom and dad, you might be able to think about one, but it's almost like when the parent tells you to do something, you're not going to do it, but you have that third party, that third person that's not related to you or part of your life says, hey, you should be thinking about maybe opening up a Roth IRA or building up your emergency savings. It's something that clicks, and you're like, oh, I need to do that. A lot of the times it's not what you say, it's how you say it, and we kind of talk about that. How we say it with clients, making sure we're communicating the right way. But one of the things that we've done is creating like educational content. So that's why we started our social media page, being able to get the good information out to people that want to see it. Because there's a lot of stuff on the internet, and there's a lot of so-called financial experts, but they get paid by the clicks and the likes and everything. So that's why, like, when we founded our Instagram and our Facebook page, we did a lot of educational content. And even like when I go speak at the local high schools, they say, hey, if a kid asks me, a more detailed question, it's like, actually, I recorded a video of how advisors get paid. Why don't you just go take 15 minutes and watch it? So it's providing the resources to them. But if you have that third party, Zach and I, for example, if we're working with you and your kid wants information, we started to offer beneficiary plans, being able to meet with the beneficiaries to make sure we set them up successfully for their future too.
And I think that's really key to hear is that your kids are hearing so much from their TikTok advisors and from their Instagram advisors. And I don't have TikTok, but I get videos. My best friend lives down in Nashville, actually not too far from where Brendan lives, and he sends me videos all the time about, man, you don't save in your 401k, save into this life insurance policy, and it'll be tax-free for life, and it's the greatest thing since, sliced bread, or Betty White, who came out actually before sliced bread, she was born. And I think it's crazy to think of all of the garbage that we hear on social media, and people aren't regulated. People aren't told you can't say this, you can say this because they're not licensed. And so go to your professional resources. I wouldn't ask my brother how to fix my zero-turn mower because he doesn't have a zero-turn mower and he doesn't do it. I'm going to go to a professional and I'm going to have that person look at it and make sure that I'm getting the advice that I need to. And so I definitely encourage and second that. So now,
Actually, it's kind of funny because I review with that. This was maybe last year or something. I go to the client's master review, and he's like, so I heard this on TikTok, and I'm like, stop. Like, repeat that sentence and hear what you're saying to me. You heard it on TikTok. Do you want to invest? Like, it's just crazy. So, yeah, call the professionals. Don't always listen to what's on the internet.
and sometimes those things have a sliver of truth in them. Where it might lead us to a conversation about, maybe if it's talking about AI, for example, maybe that's something that we need to talk about for your portfolio or for how you're investing or something. But maybe it's just a piece of it. Anytime you hear someone say, don't do this, go ahead and only do this, that's generally a bad sign for most people. So I want to go back to Craig here. So you and your team built something called Beyond the Summit. As a guide. So talk about Beyond the Summit as a guide, and then are people actually using this to help conversations, or is it just something that gets tossed on the counter and never looked at again, like the coupon savers that we get all the time in the mail?
Actually, Sophie, do you mind grabbing one? It's in the cardboard box. So one of the things that we try to do at Paramount is when we're meeting with our clients, we always want to try to show the most value we possibly can as being the advisor. So over the years, the conversations with the clients, the things that Zach's going through with his dad, we wanted to create a document that helps you get organized, where you can put all the hard data down, like your thoughts. Where's everything located, all your accounts, but also kind of like what Brendan said, what values do you want to pass on to the next generation? What thoughts do you want for them to know, like your final wishes and everything like that? So we created this. We had it created for you guys, and for 3 easy payments of $19.99, it could be yours. Just kidding, you guys get it for free, don't worry. But it's basically an organizer that goes through everything. It's a thoughtful, very methodical way where it starts out, nice table of contents, but then it breaks it down with financial assets. Where's all your life insurance? Where's your investment accounts? Who's your attorney? So if you pass away, who should your beneficiaries reach out to for your estate? What about your life insurance? Where do you bank through? It's an organizer. That way, people don't have to go searching for everything. You know where everything is in one nice clean page. And I believe we're getting this digitally, right?
Say that again.
We're getting it digitally done?
Yeah, so we have a digital copy of this as well. So one thing that we're going to encourage for those of you who use your website, Eat Money regularly, we're going to encourage you can do an electronic copy of this. You can store it online, and then every couple of years, if we want, we can go back and we can actually reevaluate it. Has anything changed? Has life circumstances? Those types of things. So it'll be great because we have a vault where we can keep it that's secure. There's a spot in there where it says who gets this and when do they get it. Do they get it when I pass away? Is it all of my kids are going to receive a copy of it? That type of thing. I love it because in the back there's 3 pages that go over your legacy and your values. what is something that you want to tell your spouse, and it's in there, or what is something that you want to tell your kids that you've never really maybe voiced to them? One of the things, and this doesn't do it, but I love this idea, and anyone who's a grandparent, I highly encourage doing this. We have 5 kids, like I mentioned, and my dad has, I don't know, probably 20 grandkids, 24 grandkids or something. And so what I did recently is I went out to ChatGPT, and I said, okay, ChatGPT, my dad rides a Harley, or used to ride a Harley. He's got a big beard. My daughter has bangs, and she wears shirts with bows on it, and holey jeans, and she's got Converse shoes. Make a picture of them, the two of them riding a Harley together that they can color. And 30 seconds later, I've got a picture that my daughter sat down with my dad a couple months ago, colored the picture with him. It was a coloring picture, and then my dad wrote a personalized note to her. And now I'm getting those laminated so that they'll have it forever, because Dad's not going to be around. Use technology, use these types of resources that we have here for you, because it helps you think through things that you've never thought of saying, things that you've never thought of like communicating to other people, and use the things that are out there. I'm going to patent that idea, so it's also 3 easy payments in $19.99, and I'll show you how to use ChatGPT for it.
But I think it's just, and one of the things that Zach was saying about, we have a section called Legacy, Letters, and Values, and it's more like the personal reflection, so that human side. A lot of times that's, I think, the hardest thing to talk about, right? It's the emotional, at least, I guess in our family, we never really had that conversation much. But it's something where if you don't want to talk about it, you can write it down, at least that way that person knows. And, just a quick story I was thinking about when Andrew and Brandon were talking. If you decide to name someone, I think the theme of the night is communication. Always, it's better to have a conversation than not have a conversation. But if you decide to name someone that's maybe not a child, but you don't tell them, it leaves a lot of unknown. So I had a client, one of her family members passed away. She was a sole beneficiary on a retirement account. And usually if you're already dealing with the grieving process, and if you inherit money, could change someone's life. But the emotional turmoil I've seen that person go through because they're like, well, why me? Like, why was I named the sole beneficiary for this? And they don't know. So if you don't want to communicate that, tell your advisor, tell us, write a note and say, hey, we can put it in your e-money vault and say, hey, if I pass away, give this note to this person. That way it just gives them kind of that peace of mind the rest of their life. So they're not wandering.
Yeah. I've told a number of clients it's okay to do a memorandum of understanding on certain key things, whether it's the lake house story or whatever. Hey, we set the trust up to say this, and this about the lake house, but here's what we really hope will happen is that we opened an LLC, opened a bank account, we put $20,000 in there because we're forcing you all to chip in on maintenance fees. We hope you'll keep this and use it and enjoy it with your kids, but if it doesn't work out, we hope you'll get along and get it sold. And it's okay to have that document that goes along with the legal document too, and just explains your thought and heart on some things too. So those are sometimes as much or more valuable than a legal document.
The Beyond the Summit document, it also touches on what Andrew talked about earlier, where it's just nice to see where beneficiaries are, where accounts are, how they're titled, and this kind of walks you through that. So that being said, I want to kind of wrangle this together, get you guys back out into the wild, but before that, I want each of you to take this question over the, just think for everyone that's here, and if they pass this information along, we're recording this so other people are going to see this. If families could do one thing over the next 30 days to lower the chances of estate chaos, and if they want to, start, other than winning the lottery, giving it all to charity, and just, putting everything away, what's a realistic task that everyone could just walk away with? Hey, this would really help to kind of push the dial forward.
Is it okay if I hijack that question to tell one more story and then do okay, because it just came up as they were talking. This is going to be short, I promise. But I realized as we were telling these stories that a lot of these stories we're talking about around the importance of communication. It's hey, here are these families that didn't communicate, and look how drastically bad, or look how bad things turned out for them. It's this doomsday. You should do this so that you can avoid worst case scenario. Well, I actually heard a cool story back in June. It was the opposite. It was somebody who had the conversation. There was a positive result. that came from having the conversation. So I was out in Colorado Springs, and I had given a presentation out there the year before, right? So like in this is 2025, so it would have been 2024, and we talked about something similar, just the idea around communicating with the next generation, letting them know, blah, blah, blah. And so I go back out there, do another presentation. He comes up to me afterwards, and he's like, Brendan, I just want to tell you something. I was like, what? And he goes, last year when you were here, you encouraged us that we should have conversations with our family about our money. And he said, I had told him before, I was like, hey, I've got money, it's coming to you. We just sort of always avoided it. But I said, hey, there's going to be money coming to you. I decided to sit down and lay out for them, here's what I have, here's how I see it playing out. And through that conversation, when he laid it out, his son looked at him, and he was like, Dad, we don't want that. And he goes, his dad's like, what do you mean? And he was like, we don't want that money. And he's like, why do you not want it? He goes, we don't want that. We want to spend more time with you while you're still here. We'd rather you use it now, and then we'll figure out the rest when you're gone. And so he goes, oh, really? I didn't know that. I just thought you'd want me to leave as much as I could. And he's like, no, we don't want that. And so he comes up afterwards, and he goes, Brendan, we sat down. You forced me to, well, you didn't force me. I didn't force him to do anything. We talked about it. He had this conversation. His kids tell him that. And so he goes, I just want to tell you that 2 months ago, we went on a family trip overseas for 2 weeks, our whole family, and created memories and experiences together, all because I decided to sit down and have that conversation, which I just think was so cool that because here's the thing. A lot of you are going to hear this. You're going to leave here tonight. You're going to walk out and go, yeah, need to have the conversation. That's right. Communication's important, and it's easy to leave and do nothing about it. But I give him props. He actually did something about it, and it led to a good conversation, and then memories and experiences that his family are going to remember forever. And he's 82, so they can't do this every year, but they decided to do it. And anyway, so you get the point. So, all right, what's the one thing I would do? If I was going to do one thing, or to encourage you guys to do one thing. I know I have my phone out, that looks rude, but there's a few questions that I would say, if you have a pen to write down, I would say if you go home and do anything, go ask yourself these questions to assess how am I doing currently with my plan. So number one, how confident am I that my money and the way that things are set up now is going to bring my family together when I'm gone?
We'll send these questions out afterwards.
Yeah, we do that too, that's fine.
There is paper and pen on the table for you to take notes if you want to, but we can send it.
Say you live up to what you write down. So, yeah, we got it. And we can send it out. All right. The second one is, what concerns do you have about the next generation receiving your money? Any concerns? Number 3 is, in what areas do you think disagreement might exist? Number 4 is, do all of your heirs understand the roles, like Andrew talked about, and have they bought into them? Do they know what their role is, and have they fully embraced and accepted it? And then number 5 is, have they actually looked at and reviewed and been over your estate plan and your documents with you? And so you go through each one of those 5. What it does is you get to check in the box and go, yes, yep, that we have. And you feel good about it, you feel confident, you go to bed at night going, all right, I've done the work that I need to do. Or one of them will highlight a gap where you go, all right, I probably need to address that. So those are the 5, we'll send them out. But if you wrote them down, props to you. You can have a free drink when you leave. But maybe not when you leave, before you leave. Yeah.
It's just going to be great.
Oh, it's gonna be a hard one to top. I don't know how you top that. I think making a simple tool where you are laying out columns like a spreadsheet, and yes, some of it's going to be assets, where they're at, titling, beneficiaries, values, but I think also trying to hand down, even for between spouses, right? So thinking about first death situations and not just second death. Who are the contractors that we use? Who are the professionals that we use? Who are the car people that we use? I'm trying to make something that you can begin to tweak over time that not only shows a lay of the land of assets and beneficiaries and values, but also relationships. There's a lot of power in our families and the relationships of our network that we use. And so trying to equip like your own spouse to navigate in a world without you can sometimes be as simple as just making sure the right relationships get handed off. It's not all about just having her name on a beneficiary form.
real quick, I love that idea, and we didn't talk about this before, but Craig and I have actually talked about having a little black book of connections, because I've made, I work in, used to own a bunch of real estate and have, family that work in real estate, and so we have a lot of contractors and people that we trust, that we know, and if anyone here knows, it's extremely difficult to find a good contractor or a good person to work on your car, and so we're kind of working on this like little black book of people. So that's a question that's like not out of the ordinary for us. So if you have that type of question, feel free to reach out to us. That's another way that we try to provide value and get you connected with people. But I think that's great, because a lot of times a husband might be doing all the contracting and the work around the house and those kind of things. That's just a more traditional family style, and they might not know who to call, for those types of things. So I didn't think about that. It's a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, don't be afraid to like send us a text. Hey, do you know someone? Because chances are we do probably know, especially with some of our clients as well. I think the biggest takeaway is, with us creating this Beyond the Summit document, if you're not sure how to start it, use this as your guide. But also utilize Zach and I. Like if you want us to be that third party, we're not an attorney, right? That's why I have Andrew, so we don't like to play one on TV or anything like that. So there's certain things that's beyond our scope. But just having that third party there to bounce ideas or help tone the temperature down, or even just start the conversation, ask the correct questions. That's why you have us. But yeah, utilize the Beyond the Summit. We're super excited. It looks great. This is the first, Zach brought them today. They were printed and they look phenomenal. So you did a great job with everything there.
Thanks.
So I think that's it. Do any of you have anything else you want to say before we kind of open it up in case someone has some questions?
Looks like dessert table's out, so feel free to get up. You're not going to offend us to get dessert, and the bar's still open too if you need an extra drink.
Awesome. So we left a little bit of time here before the end. You can either mingle or first off, does anyone have any questions? Anything that they're thinking, like, hey, this is a situation. Don't be too shy to ask a question, because most likely other people might have that same question.
No, that would be good. No.
Go ahead, Steve.
Can you shout louder?
Okay, I'll bring it over.
I can speak for a while. But before the attorney, and it's actually has to do with me.
Sugar person?
Family issues, obviously, with me, with myself and my two sisters. And my mom is no longer around. We've had some issues going on with that. But what I was gonna ask, my two sisters, I know how they are when it comes to money and possessions and all that kind of stuff, especially when it comes with my dad. I don't have a real good relationship with my dad, and I know who's going to be the executor, which is no big deal. I don't care. Is it going to be okay for me to walk away and say, I want nothing? I don't want to be involved. Don't. That's the way it's going to happen. I don't want anything. I don't want money, car, nothing. I just left alone and walked away. Is that gonna be?
And as his wife, he'll probably get everything. Because his dad really caters to the two, and he doesn't cater to him, and he feels guilty about it. And I tell him all the time, he will get everything. Because his dad really, really loves him. But he just can't express that. So that's why I think he'll get everything. But he's saying he doesn't, he wants to just remove himself from the situation and not accept it. And I say, no.
Well, thankfully you haven't led me in the direction you want me to go with my answer. No, I would say, one, yes, you can always disclaim an inheritance, right? So that's it. It's called a disclaimer, and you can always say, I don't want something that someone else has said that I'm legally entitled to. And usually in the instances of disclaimer, the person that disclaims is treated as having predeceased the testator, and so it goes to the next party in line or down the bloodline. But so yeah, as a practical answer, can you decide you don't want anything from your father to avoid being involved with family dynamics? Of course, it's a free country. You can disclaim an inheritance if you want. I guess practically, I would say even if you do that, I would still challenge you to try to be around the family and be a part of the death and grieving process. And maybe there's some doors that could be opened through death towards reconciliation in some of those relationships and stuff. So even if you aren't looking to get ahead from a monetary standpoint from someone's passing, I would still challenge you not to dip out of being a part of the family around the time of a significant loss, because I think there's value there.
I like that, and I know you didn't ask me, but I just kind of wanted to echo, death changes people. It opens up doors often. We see that, that transition in life, and reconciliation, is an awesome thing to see through that. There were some of my relatives, siblings that we hadn't talked to in several years, just politics and other stuff that have came up, and they decided to separate themselves. And through everything going on with my dad, it's opened up doors. And I'm talking to a sister that I haven't had a word from in 4 years. So that can help bridge gaps, which I think is not something we often think. That's not why you're kind of just looking, how do I separate myself? But let's look at how to use this as an as a possible opportunity as well.
So I'm going to piggyback on that and say that we have a child that has excluded themselves from the family for the last 20 years. So while they're going to be one of 3 children in a will, I'm going to assume that they are going to disclaim themselves, and they're not going to accept. They've not been home for funerals or weddings, or they just haven't been a part of the family. Can we address that in our estate? Should they disclaim or not come forward? What can we do? Then we split it between the other 2, or can that be addressed?
Yeah, well, I mean, just roll with this here and see if we can make it work. But yeah, so first, I'm sorry, right? You have a child that hasn't been a part of the family in 20 years, and that's a really hard thing. So I'm just going to say I'm sorry for that. I think that it's a tip of the hat to you that you're including them in an estate plan. One, that you still must love them and have feelings that you want to bless them. That's why they're being included. And so if they end up not wanting to come forward, I mean, I hope the plan would have alternatives. If they disclaim, I hope the plan has been drafted with enough specificity that it's either extirpable and it's going to go down the bloodline, or that it says, if living, otherwise this gift shall lapse and go over here to this party. So I'd have to look at the specifics of how you got things worded, but that's where I also think that memorandum of understanding or additional documents can be drafted in your own words to go along with legal documents, to let the family know what your hopes are related to that particular relationship. But estrangement from children is a really, really hard thing. I see it a lot. I'm sorry that you're facing that. I don't know, it's maybe not a perfect answer, but in some situations they're difficult to have good answers to.
You mentioned compensating the executor specifically. Sorry. I was the executor of my father's will, and it was very awkward because I didn't know that I was even allowed to be compensated for all the work. And so it was, I spoke to the county clerk and of where he lived and kind of got an idea. But is there a standard amount?
Yeah, so when we discuss, when we discuss executor fees, we have to separate those from trustee fees. And so executor fees in Ohio are statutory, which means there's a computation, and I can't recite it to you perfectly, but it's something like 4% of the first $100,000 in assets, and then 3% of $100,000 to $300,000, and then 2% of everything over $400,000. It steps up based on the value of the estate. Now you're going to take that fee as ordinary income, so you're going to pay taxes on it, but it's going to come off the top before distributions are made. So that's what an executor fee looks like. Yes, in other words, it's very formulaic in Ohio. Trustee fees are governed differently than that in the chapter for probate. They're governed by the Ohio Trust Code, and so it says trustees are entitled to reasonable compensation under the law. And if you look at what that means and how the trust code defines it, it's typically what banks in the geographical area where the trust was formed are charging to play trustee, particularly the bank where the trust has a depository checking account. And so if there's, and typically if you want to know what that is, it's around here 1 to 2% of assets under management per year. So trusts that go on for a long time, there are some fees that are taken every year, but also managing a trust for multiple years is not often a fun job. And if you've ever heard of, trust fund children and these sorts of things, these slang terms, when people know that someone's holding a pot of money for them out there, they don't always leave that person alone. And so it's oftentimes there's hard decisions that have to be made. I always say trustees do 2 things, head decisions and hard decisions. Head decisions is wise management of assets. Hard decisions is saying yes and no to your heirs or beneficiaries the way you would. So yeah, I think in some ways, yes, there's compensation structures. Yes, they are defined in the law for trustees and executors. Neither of them I look at as fun jobs. So
With that, there's in writing somewhere.
that's true. Yeah.
I have a quick question about trusts. Could you explain how their benefit, what's the benefit of them, and what is a benefit of having a trust, and who should have them?
Yeah. So the benefits of having a trust, first off, 2 broad categories of trust. So if we just want to do 60 seconds on trust, we would say revocable versus irrevocable. Revocable, when you hear somebody say we have a trust or family trust, 98% of people in America that have a trust have a revocable family trust. This is primarily for probate avoidance, so keeping everything out of court and potentially multiple different court jurisdictions. As well as creating management structures and spreading distributions over time and dealing with specific assets going to specific people. So trusts, revocable and irrevocable. Irrevocable are more used for nuanced planning situations, whether it is holding a life insurance policy for a liquidity event, whether it's Medicaid planning for nursing homes, whether it is taxable estate planning and trying to get stuff out of our taxable estate for really wealthy families. So irrevocable trusts, not going to spend as much time on them. They're more nuanced for particular situations. Revocable trusts are more the ones that we use in most family situations. And the categories of people that need them, I always break it down into 3 groups of people. People with complex assets is group number 1. So you have stuff in other states. I always use my grandparents as an example. Really hardworking people. They both cut hair. And just saved and were frugal and bought rental properties and just worked really hard. And over time, they accumulated some assets, and they have a timeshare in Aruba and a timeshare down in Sanibel and a family cabin down in Belmont County, and they had some rentals in Richland County and the farm they live on in Lorain County. So, if they would die with all this stuff titled in their name, we'd be dealing with all these different probate courts all over the place and in other countries. And so they have complexity to their assets. Group number 2 would be complex beneficiaries. So anybody that has addictions, gambling, cognitive disabilities, Down syndrome, anybody you wouldn't want to give a pile of money to tomorrow is a complex beneficiary. And complex goals is my 3rd group. So people that say, hey Andrew, we want to give 70% of our assets to our kids' generation, then we want to take 30% down to our grandkids' generation, and we want to incentivize home ownership or getting an education or whatever it may be. Sometimes our goals, whether they're charitable or whether they're multi-generational, are just too complex to accomplish on a simple beneficiary form where I write somebody's name and a percentage next to it. So if I have complex assets, complex beneficiaries, or complex goals, that's when having a trust is going to be a more effective tool for me.
Anyone else?
Good.
Going once? Oh, there we go.
Will we trust?
Yeah, just gotta look at your situation. First off, everybody should have a will. I mean, we want something to fall back on. I just want people to start thinking about last wills and testaments more like they do the airbag in their car, is my joke, right? We drive around with it every day, we never want to use it. And so that's how you should look at a will. A will is a backup tool, but I always, if I can, want to streamline things to my beneficiaries and my chosen love relationships. I always want to keep them out of court. I always want to make it easier, quicker, faster, and cheaper for them to get control of things, manage things, and dispose of things, or whatever needs to happen. So yes, you should have a will, but the real question would be, I think, on the other side of things between trust and beneficiary designations, and looking and saying, yeah, we're gonna have a will just in case we miss something. But really, we want to look at, do we want to just go beneficiaries on everything, or do we need a trust for some reason? That comes back to the prior question and analyzing those factors.
And I'm going to piggyback on that. Andrew and I were having a conversation with someone the other day. You have an 18-year-old kid who has assets in their name, it's likely necessary that they have a will, they need to have a will, they need to have healthcare power of attorney, because they're not under your control anymore.
Your college kids, at some point they go off to college and you can't make healthcare decisions for them anymore. They get in a car accident, you don't have the right to know what's going on with the blood work and what they found on the MRI. They have to give you these authorities and powers back that you always had. So it's a good thing to think about as kids grow, just getting basic powers of attorney and things in place, because we never know when they're off at college is what's going to happen, and we want to be able to help them if something does happen.
We often think we need to have assets to have a will or those types of things, but I mean, it can be as simple as, I think of Craig and Sophie. They've got a cat that Craig undoubtedly loves more than Sophie. And who gets the cat? I mean, it sounds like a goofy question, but who gets the cat is an important thing. And so if you have an 18 or 19-year-old who has a cat or a dog or something, they want to know that that's going to someone. So we often think that you need assets and money and those kind of things, but you don't really need it. I mean, you have life and you have things in your name. And so it's important, at almost any age over 18 years old, to have those simple documents taken care of.
Transfer upon death. What is the difference between, or what are the benefits or the drawbacks of transfer upon death?
Yeah, so the two main beneficiary acronyms that we most commonly hear are POD and TOD. So payable on death, transferable upon death. I always say we pay cash or liquid assets. We transfer anything I could touch with my hands. So cars, boats, campers, houses, condos is a TOD. And money in a money market account or checking, whatever investment account is a POD. And so, there's no real benefit over per se doing it through a trust, but the benefits to beneficiaries over doing it through a will is obviously you're not taking everything through court. So you're keeping your family out of judges, magistrates, and having to get bonded, and this is gonna hurry up and wait, this is gonna take 6 months or a year. So, basic beneficiary benefits are just speed. When you make a claim on an asset, typically that looks like filling out a form and submitting a death certificate, and bam, in a couple weeks I've got the asset. And so, speed and efficiency and reduction of cost, conservation of overall family assets is the benefit of beneficiary designations.
Yeah,
I also wanted to mention, a lot of times titling trumps will. And so if we think about like a life insurance policy, or if we think about a retirement account, if you have a beneficiary labeled on that retirement account, I had it happen one time. Husband, new wife, husband passes away, new wife gets assets, except old wife's name was the beneficiary. Old wife gets the assets. Now, there could be a fight for it, and they can take it to court, and there's other things that can happen there. But those actual designations, like POD, TOD, like you was talking about, can trump will. And so just because you have a will doesn't mean you shouldn't have those other things titled correctly. They really go hand in hand. Am I correct in saying that? Yes.
Yes, POD is good, yeah, those things would be like survivorship.
I have terrible hearing.
I'm sorry.
So Craig is right. That's okay.
POD and the TODs, do they take the place of joint survivorship, or is that?
right, but not.
The joint with rights of survivorship is a form of beneficiary designation. It's just a particular type. Joint with rights of survivorship comes up on checking accounts, right? So joint checking account is typically joint with rights of survivorship. It's just a type of beneficiary titling that says multiple, usually two, but sometimes 3 or 4 parties are going to own this thing, and last man standing gets to keep it, right? And so that's really the essence of joint survivorship. It is a form of beneficiary titling. It's just a last man standing form. We see it with deeds on real property too. We can have joint survivorship deeds in Ohio. So typically we want to see husband and wife have a joint survivorship deed that needs to be recorded first if we're doing beneficiary structure, and then we're looking at a transfer on death designation affidavit, the TOD deed, as I kind of slang call it, that would say, okay, upon the death of the second of us, we want it to go, equal between the two kids or what have you. So, yeah, it's a good question. Joint survivorship's a great tool. We should use it when it makes sense.
Just really quick on the social media in terms, I don't mean to peek in or anything, but I've just been able to learn a lot from you guys just sitting here talking. Just as someone who's on the tail end of this, where I'm in college, going to graduate soon, I see my parents are getting older, I recognize that. They're going to pass eventually. And as the oldest sibling who also believes he's the golden child, kind of putting that trifecta where, how would I go about distributing that money if I do get the majority of the wealth while not destroying the relationships with my other siblings and just going through that?
So I think it's the right cooks.
So communication is that? I mean, yeah, we can talk about it in a minute too if you want, because I think that's like a layered conversation. But I mean, I know this sounds like it would be the
Let's break here.
But I really think it comes down to communication, right? And then how are you going to lay it out? How are you going to explain why you're doing what you're doing, the reasons that you're doing it? It's an interfamily thing. It's just a really hard conversation to have. I think the first thing I would we should talk about in a minute. The first thing I would say is not how do you even bring it up to begin with. That's usually the biggest barrier to get over. Is okay, I hear you, and I want to have those conversations, but the thought of having them freak me out. So how do I even bring it up in a way that it can be everybody's receptive to it? So yeah, I guess we're gonna go to the dead horse and say communication again. But were you wondering anything at all about how to distribute it, or was it mostly around the relationship side?
Distribution too. Yeah, it's a big part.
But we can talk in a minute too.
Okay.
Yeah, short of time.
Real quick, I'll just mention one thing as well. I think in this situation, I don't love avoidance. However, if we can talk to our parents, I think about my brothers and sisters. Again, there's a whole smattering of us. There's 9 of us, and some of them are black sheep, and some of them are more kind of, I'm gonna say just established. And for a couple of my brothers and sisters, we're like, listen, we don't care what we get. It's not a big deal for us. But we know that there are siblings out there who are gonna fight for every nickel that they can get. And so we're just liquidate it all and just split it even. We don't care. We'll get everything divvied up ahead of time. All of the heirlooms and those kind of things. But house, car, all of those things, just liquidate them. And so I would say, don't put yourself in a position where you have to distribute. If you can get your parents just to put in their will and have the conversation ahead of time and to put in their documents, just liquidate it and distribute it evenly, you just remove that entire headache from yourself. So it's not an avoidance. It's avoiding the problem by doing something ahead of time. So you're able to proactively resolve it. Yep, proactive avoidance. There you go.
Things help.
Well, thanks everyone. We appreciate it. So we have in the back the Beyond the Summit document for you. So we'd love you to take one. There's also a business and a real estate addendum if you want to grab. So some of you have real estate assets outside of just your house, or you might have a business like an LLC. So there's an addendum there that not everyone needs it, but if you want to take that as well, it helps you kind of put to words as well, like the contractor situation we're talking about. We have that on the real estate addendum. Who are your contacts for the rentals that you own that you want to make sure the next generation has that information as well? So feel free to take those documents back there. They're great. We just got them today. We're super excited. But we have electronic copies as well. So if you know someone who you think could need one, like a parent or a friend, feel free to reach out to us or reach out to Laura, our admin, and just say, hey, I'd love to get another copy of Beyond the Summit. And we can go ahead and get those documents to you as well. Thanks, everyone. The bar closes in 3 minutes, so rush over there if you want to. But there's desserts as well. We appreciate everyone coming out. Thanks.